Before you learned how to think, someone had already begun thinking for you. They gave you names for things, rules, boundaries, ideas about what was sacred, shameful, dangerous, acceptable. And for a while, this was necessary. A child survives through trust long before it survives through reason. But childhood ends. The commands often remain. And eventually, one question becomes unavoidable. How many of your beliefs are actually yours? History gives us an uncomfortable answer about obedience. Human beings don't need to be monsters to participate in terrible systems. Sometimes they only need authority, social pressure, and permission to stop questioning. Solomon Asch demonstrated how easily people could publicly deny what their own eyes showed them when surrounded by a confident majority. Stanley Milgram later showed ordinary participants obeying instructions to administer what they believed were dangerous electric shocks. Obedience, apparently, can overpower judgment. Then consider one of humanity's oldest religious stories: a garden, a command, a forbidden tree, and a serpent who asks the humans to question what they have been told. Curiously, the forbidden tree isn't the tree of violence or the tree of evil. It is the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. That doesn't make Satan a hero, but it creates a disturbing philosophical possibility. What if the first sin wasn't simply disobedience? What if it was the moment a creature discovered that authority could be questioned? Centuries later, poets and philosophers would become fascinated by this rebellious figure. Milton gave him terrifying charisma. Blake complicated the boundary between obedience and rebellion. Shelley questioned the morality of the ruler himself, and Bakunin pushed the idea to its provocative conclusion: Satan as the first rebel, the first dissenter, the first free thinker. But rebellion contains its own danger. Some rebels want to destroy the throne. Others simply want to sit on it. So the real question isn't whether Satan was good. It is far more dangerous. Can you truly call yourself free if you have never seriously considered the possibility of saying no? Some defeats end when you lose. Others begin there. The traditional satanic story is usually remembered as a story of pride. A celestial being rejects divine authority, rebels, falls, and becomes the adversary. But beneath the theology lies a more unsettling philosophical event. A being says no to the highest possible authority. Think about what that means. If God represents absolute authority, then rebellion against God isn't comparable to disobeying a king, government, parent, or institution. There is no higher court to appeal to, no alternative constitution, no external authority capable of validating your resistance. You stand alone. That makes Satan's rebellion interesting even without making it admirable. Because independent thought begins precisely where external validation becomes insufficient. Milton understood this tension brilliantly in Paradise Lost. His Satan possesses intelligence, courage, ambition, resentment, and enormous rhetorical power. He refuses submission even after catastrophic defeat. Yet Milton also gives us the warning hidden inside rebellion. Satan escapes one hierarchy while becoming consumed by himself. His freedom gradually becomes another prison. Pride commands him. Revenge commands him. His identity depends upon opposition. This matters because rejecting authority doesn't automatically create autonomy. You can leave a religion and become enslaved to hatred of religion. You can reject social expectations and build your entire personality around shocking society. You can escape one ideology only to surrender yourself completely to another. A person controlled by opposition is still controlled. The master has simply become invisible. Perhaps this is the first lesson hidden inside Satan's fall. Freedom isn't merely the ability to refuse. It is the ability to examine why you are refusing. The important question isn't whether you can say no to God, society, tradition, your parents, your culture, or the crowd. The important question is whether the voice saying no is actually yours. Because rebellion can liberate the mind, but rebellion without self-examination can become obedience wearing darker clothes. There is something strange about forbidden knowledge. The moment someone tells you that a question must never be asked, the prohibition becomes part of the question. Return to Eden. The serpent doesn't physically force Eve to eat. There is no weapon, no coercion. He speaks. He challenges the meaning of the command and introduces doubt into a world built on certainty. And doubt changes everything. Before the fruit, Adam and Eve possess innocence. Afterward, they recognize nakedness, experience shame, and become conscious of moral distinction. Knowledge doesn't make them happier. It makes them aware. That difference matters. We often romanticize awakening as liberation, but awareness has a price. Once you recognize contradiction, you cannot easily return to innocence. Once you understand that parents can be wrong, governments can lie, traditions can preserve injustice, and crowds can believe absurdities, certainty becomes harder to inhabit. This is why free thought can feel less like receiving an answer and more like losing a home. The serpent, viewed symbolically, becomes dangerous because he introduces an alternative interpretation. What if the command itself can be examined? That question extends far beyond religion. Every durable authority creates boundaries around acceptable thought. Families have them. Cultures have them. Political movements have them. Even communities that celebrate skepticism develop assumptions their members hesitate to challenge. The taboo changes. The mechanism survives. But there is another danger here. Questioning everything doesn't make you intelligent. Suspicion can become as irrational as obedience. A person who automatically rejects official explanations is no freer than someone who automatically accepts them. Both have replaced judgment with reflex. Real skepticism demands something harder: evidence, consistency, the willingness to discover that your preferred conclusion is wrong. Perhaps the serpent's deepest symbolic gift wasn't an answer. It was uncertainty. And uncertainty is terrifying because once the question enters the garden, authority must compete with something it never needed before: your own judgment. Every authority wants obedience. The clever ones make obedience feel moral. This distinction matters because power becomes far more stable when people stop experiencing submission as submission. The perfect subject doesn't need constant surveillance. He watches himself. He feels guilt before punishment arrives. Religion didn't invent this mechanism, neither did governments. It appears wherever human beings organize themselves around authority. The question is whether obedience deserves the moral status we often give it. Stanley Milgram's experiments remain disturbing precisely because participants weren't commanded by armed soldiers. They were pressured by a researcher in a laboratory coat. Institutional legitimacy was enough to push many beyond their personal discomfort. The lesson wasn't that people enjoy cruelty. It was that responsibility becomes strangely flexible when authority enters the room. I decided becomes I was instructed. And this is where Satan becomes philosophically useful as a symbol. His defining gesture is refusal. Yet refusal alone isn't virtue. A child can refuse medicine. A criminal can refuse justice. A dictator can refuse constitutional limits. Disobedience can protect freedom or destroy it. So the real moral achievement isn't rebellion, it is judgment. Immanuel Kant described enlightenment as humanity's emergence from self-imposed immaturity, the condition of allowing others to think on our behalf. His famous challenge, sapere aude, means essentially, dare to know. That demand is heavier than it sounds. Thinking for yourself means losing one of obedience's greatest comforts, the ability to outsource responsibility. Once you examine the command, you become partially responsible for what follows. You can no longer hide completely behind scripture, tradition, ideology, your leader, your family, or the crowd. Perhaps that is why freedom frightens us. Freedom doesn't merely remove chains, it removes excuses. And maybe the deepest rebellion isn't shouting against heaven. Maybe it is quieter. The moment you stop asking, "What am I supposed to believe?" and begin asking, "What reasons do I have for believing it?" Here is where the romantic image of rebellion begins to collapse. The rebel isn't automatically the opposite of the tyrant. Sometimes he is simply the tyrant waiting for his turn. History is full of movements that began by denouncing oppression and later created new systems of control. Revolutions can overthrow kings and produce dictators. Ideologies can promise liberation while demanding absolute loyalty from anyone who enters their ranks. The language changes. The psychology often doesn't. This is what makes Satan more interesting than a simple symbol of freedom. In Paradise Lost, his rebellion doesn't end with independence. He wants influence. He persuades, manipulates, recruits, and eventually interferes with creatures who had nothing to do with his original conflict. His resistance becomes expansion. His liberation becomes domination. And suddenly the rebel begins resembling the authority he despised. We do this on smaller scales too. Someone escapes a controlling family, then becomes controlling in relationships. Someone leaves a rigid ideology, then humiliates anyone who disagrees with their new worldview. Someone discovers skepticism, then treats believers as intellectually inferior. The prison changes architecture. The prisoner becomes the guard. This is why free thought requires more than courage. It requires self-suspicion. You must be capable of questioning your enemies, your teachers, your traditions, and eventually yourself, especially yourself. Because your mind is remarkably skilled at disguising desire as reason. We search for evidence that confirms what we already believe. We defend identities as though they were arguments. We notice hypocrisy in opponents while negotiating privately with our own. So perhaps the real test of the free thinker arrives after rebellion. When nobody is forcing you anymore. When the old authority has lost its power. When you finally possess the freedom you demanded. What do you do with it? Do you create room for other minds? Or do you build another throne and call it freedom? So, was Satan the first free thinker? Perhaps the question matters more than the answer. Bakunin saw Satan as the mythic rebel who challenged divine authority and offered humanity knowledge. Milton gave that rebel a voice powerful enough to disturb the boundary between villain and revolutionary. Blake saw energies in rebellion that conventional morality struggled to contain. But none of this requires turning Satan into a hero. That would simply replace one dogma with another. The deeper lesson is about freedom itself. Freedom begins when authority loses its automatic right to your agreement. But mature freedom begins one step later, when your own beliefs lose that right too. That is much harder. Anyone can become skeptical of ideas they already dislike. The religious person easily detects contradictions in another religion. The atheist easily questions scripture. The conservative sees propaganda on the left. The progressive sees manipulation on the right. The difficult moment arrives when skepticism turns toward home. Your side, your identity, your certainty, your favorite explanation, your own reflection. A genuinely free mind must remain capable of betrayal, especially the betrayal of its previous conclusions when reality no longer supports them. That freedom can feel brutal. There is no guarantee that questioning will make you happier. Some questions destroy comforting answers without replacing them. Some truths isolate you. Some discoveries force you to admit that years of certainty were built upon weak foundations. Yet the alternative carries its own cost. A life inherited rather than examined. Perhaps Satan's enduring symbolic power comes from this uncomfortable possibility. Consciousness itself contains rebellion. To think is to compare. To compare is to judge. And to judge means authority can no longer remain unquestioned. So don't ask whether rebellion is good. Ask something harder. What deserves your obedience? Then ask the question that separates skepticism from another form of faith. What evidence could prove you wrong? Because the freest mind isn't the one that kneels before nothing. It is the one that refuses to turn even its own certainty into a god. If questioning everything brought you here, perhaps you've already found your place. Becoming a member gives you access to 100+ exclusive videos. And right now, there's a 1-month free trial available. If this content gives you something worth thinking about, super thanks is another way to help keep it alive. But sincerely, simply watching, sharing, and staying with the channel already helps enormously. Think freely, stay curious, and if you want to go deeper, join us.